When Deion Sanders, known as Coach Prime, announced he would be leaving Jackson State University to become the head coach at Colorado University, many in the Black community were disappointed. They had hoped that Sanders' presence and success at the historically Black college would usher in a new era of HBCU football success. During his 3 seasons at Jackson State, he achieved an impressive 27-5 record, won multiple Southwestern Atlantic Conference championships, and secured corporate sponsors to pay for repairs to athletic facilities. Sanders also donated part of his own salary to improving conditions for the players. His contract paid him $300,000 a year with additional bonuses for games won and a portion of ticket sales. At one point during his leadership, the city of Jackson, Mississippi, where Jackson State University is located, began having a water crisis and tap water was unsafe to drink. Sanders navigated the complex and political nature of getting his players clean drinking water. At one point, he had to take a bath in a hotel swimming pool. He also became a vocal critic of the business practices at HBCUs that he felt were shortchanging the students.
First of all, we got to get our business straight. We got to get the business straight. When I say the business straight, I could start from ticket sales all the way to concessions, to apparel, to understanding TV rights. And I could keep going down the list that you got to get this stuff together before you think God is going to bless you. God don't bless nothing that's raggedy, because that's going to be self-destruction. Only way God is going to bless you is you ready for the blessing. He's not going to put something on you that you can't carry and you can't handle. And we're just now getting to the point that we could handle the blessings that he has for us.
Despite his success at Jackson State, when Colorado University offered him a $29.5 million contract, Deion Sanders took the deal. Since racial segregation ended, HBCUs have struggled to compete with predominantly white institutions, or PWIs, for scholastic and athletic talent. They receive far less federal funding and donations, and therefore they have lower endowments. These shortfalls lead to deteriorating campus facilities, difficulty maintaining faculty, and limited scholarship opportunities, perpetuating an endless cycle. In response to these crises, some have suggested that Black athletes leverage their power and commit to attending HBCUs exclusively. However, this suggestion ignores the real problem, the industry of college athletics itself. In 2008, Lauren Smith sat excitedly at Charity Church in Fort Worth, Texas. A friend invited him to listen to a pitch for a business idea along with other potential investors. A man named D.L. Wallace stepped in front of the crowd and introduced his new venture, Primetime Player Pages. Primetime Player Pages will be a publication provided to schools and fans to highlight promising student athletes. Authorized agents would travel across the country and scout players who could be included in the periodical. Schools who were looking to recruit for their teams would pay for Primetime Player Pages to quickly find new talent. It seemed like a perfect business idea. All Lauren Smith would need to do is pay $199 to become an authorized agent. If he wanted the chance to make a bigger profit, he could also buy shares in the company. Smith was intrigued. The name of the business was a reference to another figure allegedly associated with the business idea, who had been called Prime Time throughout his successful athletic career, Deion Sanders. Lawrence decided to pay the $199 to become an agent and to invest $3,000 in company shares. He also decided to invest in another project D.L. Wallace was promoting. Wallace planned to open a charter school in conjunction with the University of North Texas. D.L. Wallace offered Lawrence a revenue-sharing agreement which would offer a return of over $174,000 in 3 years in exchange for an investment of $25,000. The site of the charter school would be Charity Church, the same church where Lauren Smith had heard the pitch for Primetime Player Pages. The pastor of Charity Church, Bishop F.R. Mays, owned a real estate company called Pinnacle Commercial Property Group. Wallace told Lauren Smith that Pinnacle would be leasing out the church building to the charter school company. Lawrence decided to give Wallace $2,500 as an initial investment into the charter school. Lauren Smith was unaware that profiting from a publicly funded nonprofit school is illegal. He also didn't know that Pinnacle Commercial Property Group did not legally own the church building and therefore could not legally rent it out to anyone. In 2010, the chancellor of UNT decided against sponsoring the charter school because he believed Charity Church was too far away from the university campus. During the 2 years that had passed, Primetime Player Pages was not published. Lawrence called around to schools to see if they had an update, and they hadn't heard about the publication at all. Lawrence allegedly decided to contact Deion Sanders for answers. Lawrence alleges that Sanders listened to his complaints and told him that he would figure out what was going on and get back to him. Lawrence said he never heard from Deion Sanders again. Lawrence and other investors filed a lawsuit against Deion Sanders and D.L. Wallace, but eventually had to drop it due to the increasing legal fees. He hoped he could file later when he was able to raise some money to cover the cost of the lawsuit. Lawrence didn't think much about his grievances until 2012 when he saw an article in the newspaper about a new charter school called Prime Prep Academy.
Inner city environments. And in the inner city, it's almost an unwritten rule that you're not going to get the kind of quality education that everybody gets in the nice suburbs. We wanted to change that paradigm. We didn't do this as a money-making vehicle. We did this to make a difference in life. We're going to change the inner city from the inside out. There are no books at Prime Prep Academy. Kids can do their homework on their iPad, their iPhone, any mobile device. They all get a laptop computer. And no more lying about, I did this at home, Mama. What you do today at school? Well, I did all right. No, the parents could go online and access just what that child accomplished in their class that particular day. Dedicated teachers, hardworking staff, people that really care about the kids in the community. We look to hire those kind of people, and that's who we attracted. That's why Prime Prep Academy is succeeding, and will continue to do so.
Prime Prep Academy was approved by the Texas Board of Education in 2011. Prime Prep claimed that the school would provide a top-tier education via e-learning software, give each child a laptop, and provide a coveted athletics environment where kids would be mentored and prepared for D1 programs by the legendary Deion Sanders. The official documents for Prime Prep didn't actually list Deion Sanders as an owner, founder, or director for the school, however. Very soon there were signs of trouble. Students claimed that in some classes assignments were handed out with the answers included. They also said that classes became socializing hours where no instruction happened, but students were still given passing grades. On the administrative side, there were conflicts that escalated to physical altercations. During one school board meeting, Sanders accused the school's chief financial officer, Kevin Jefferson, of cheating the students by misappropriating funds. Sanders grabbed Jefferson's collar and neck forcefully before pushing him against the wall.
I feel like throwing this chair at the neck right now, but I'm gonna let it ride.
That's the voice of Deion Sanders threatening violence against Prime Prep co-founder and former business partner D.L. Wallace.
Think about that, man. How in the world you think we got to school? And you gonna play me? You gonna play me, man? I'm pissed off at you, dog, because I trusted you. From man to man. I've always had your back.
Deion Sanders tells News 8, yes, that's him, and yes, he was upset after learning Wallace was paying himself $130,000 a year while the charter school students were failing. Quote, I was merely fighting for my kids, and I was sick of what he was paying himself and doing to my kids, Sanders says tonight. Sanders was on tape later suggesting to Wallace that he should be paid more, and that the reason Prime Prep got a charter to begin with was because of Deion's connections.
You don't even know how we really got this school in office. You don't really know if we ain't tell you. It ain't because all these inflated words and wonderful things we said. It was another way. Senators, political leaders that you hooked me up with, that you put me down with.
Over the next few months, Sanders would be accused of assaulting a school employee.
Sanders pleaded no contest to misdemeanor assault, and eventually Jefferson, D.L. Wallace, and many of the staff were fired. In 2014, the Texas Education Agency, or TEA, began investigating Prime Academy's participation in the National School Lunch Program. Students reported that the food was horrible if it was even provided at all. Eventually, Prime Prep Academy was dropped from the National School Lunch Program when it was discovered that the federal funds were not being used for the students' meals. There were tens of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills, lawsuits, and state investigation. In July of 2014, Prime Prep took out a $100,000 high-interest loan to try and meet payroll, pay taxes, and meet school lunch obligations. Deion Sanders donated money to the school to try to help. $35,000 in April of 2014, $50,000 in October of 2014, and $50,000 in November of 2014. Deion Sanders called D.L. Wallace a crook, and the former CFO Kevin Jefferson sued the school for firing him. When the smoke cleared, the former employees settled for $125,000. Despite the school's mounting financial and legal problems, students continue to travel to Dallas from far and wide for a chance to enroll. An article in the Dallas Observer published on August 14, 2014, reported that several prospective students were living off campus with coaches. Some of the students came from other states, and others even came from the Caribbean. Parents, mentors, coaches, and students were put at ease by Deion Sanders' assurances that all the trouble with the school would eventually be worked out. On January 30, 2015, a new board of directors appointed by the state to oversee the school voted to close Prime Prep Academy at the end of the school day due to insolvency. The school owed $710,000 and only had $60,000 in its bank accounts. Throughout the chaotic year, Deion Sanders had attempted to contact various groups of parents and encourage them to transfer their children to other schools. However, when the school closed, 288 students were still enrolled at Prime Prep Academy. Many of them had enrolled with assurances that the school provided an accredited education and a blueprint for athletic success. One of those students was DeMarcus Peterson. Prime Prep closed during DeMarcus' senior year, and he had to transfer to a different school. Thankfully, DeMarcus had already secured an athletic scholarship at UNT for the track team. Shortly after he arrived on campus and began practicing with the team, he was given the bad news. The classes he had taken at Prime Prep Academy did not meet the NCAA eligibility requirements. Therefore, he was not eligible to be on the track team, and his scholarship was canceled. $35,000 in student loans and a part-time job later, DeMarcus was able to put himself through undergraduate school. Others were not so lucky. Caleb Johnson, a 20-year-old former quarterback, has attended 3 colleges and a preparatory school since he left Prime Prep. Josh Bradford, who played basketball at Prime Prep, committed to Indiana State but wound up in community college and couldn't get a Division I school to look at him. Zach Collins attended 3 colleges before receiving his diploma. These players all absolved Sanders of responsibility for their quixotic collegiate journeys. When asked about his experience, Zach Collins said, "Yeah, you get a bad rap because your school closed because they think someone was taking money. But obviously, if you see how I see, it's not on Deion Sanders' shoulders," Collins said. He gave us all a chance just to be with him. On September 21, 2020, Deion Sanders became the coach at Jackson State. When athletic director Ashley Robinson interviewed Deion Sanders for the job, he didn't mention anything about Prime Prep. I can put it like this. That's something I really don't comment on when I get that question, but I didn't find anything negative about that situation regarding Coach Prime, Robinson said. In short, that's how I can answer that one. In 2022, Deion Sanders announced his move to Colorado University. Of course, he is leaving on much better terms than he did when Prime Prep was shut down. He's left the school with infrastructure improvements, corporate connections, and national attention that will undoubtedly continue to help future students. Sanders also makes it a habit to bring players with him as he undertakes a career change. He brought several players to Jackson State and is bringing players to Colorado State. Still, the questions that Director Robinson didn't ask seem even more important now. What was Sanders' official role at Prime Prep? What responsibility did he have to the students who were left behind? What did he learn from it? Additionally, who is D.L. Wallace? Did he use Deion Sanders' nickname without his permission for primetime player pages? What happened to that venture? The problems seen with Prime Prep Academy are a microcosm of those seen at HBCUs. Systemic neglect and poverty attract people with a passion to help the Black community and a willingness to endure the challenges of working in an environment with less resources. But these circumstances also attract scammers who see an opportunity to enrich themselves. A Messiah-like figure inspires hope of transformative change, but the challenges prove to be too entrenched for one person to solve. Deion Sanders, or even his nickname Primetime, has a hypnotic effect on a community desperate to secure quality education, mentorship, and future opportunities for their children. They believe that Deion Sanders can succeed where governments, school systems, and their own efforts have failed. Sanders' error was trusting the wrong team members to execute his vision and failing to have procedures for overseeing projects which use his name or endorsement. There's nothing which indicates that he intended to deceive or defraud anyone. However, the use of his name, reputation, and spiritual beliefs prevents the establishment of realistic expectations. Deion Sanders' involvement in Prime Prep not only represented mentorship and Black uplift, it also seemed like an accessible way for kids to access expert advice about making it to the NFL. The promise of Prime Prep Academy combined the lure of college athletics with its massive profits and the desperation of parents, teachers, administrators, coaches, and players to get a piece of the pie. Ramogi Huma was a linebacker at UCLA from 1995 to 1999. When he came to the school, he thought he had come to terms with the fact that his primary job was to play football. When registering for classes, his counselor would advise him to take easy classes that would allow him to balance his hectic football schedule. Ramogi reluctantly agreed. However, his most pressing problem were the limits placed on his income. For food, Ramogi was only allowed to use the student dining card, which had been preloaded with a specific amount as a part of his scholarship. As a linebacker, he had ate 5 to 6 meals a day back home. But at school, he could only swipe 2 to 3 times a day. Ramogi was hungry all the time and lost 10 pounds in his first year. One day, Ramogi and his teammates were told that one of the best players and All-American from a low-income household had been suspended for accepting groceries donated to him by a stranger. Ramogi believed this and many other rules for the players were unfair, so he started a campus organization to campaign for college athletes' rights. This organization would eventually become the National College Players Association, or NCPA. The reason Ramogi's teammate was punished and Ramogi wasn't allowed to make or accept extra money as a UCLA football player is due to rules from an organization called the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA. The NCAA is a nonprofit organization that regulates student athletics. It was formed in 1905 in response to the emergence of different sports teams on college campuses, particularly football teams, that were operating without uniform standards. In 1905, at least 150 students were injured and 18 students were killed while playing college football. This prompted the President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, to organize a meeting amongst colleges to create the regulating body. From its inception, the NCAA insisted on enforcing the concept of amateurism, or the idea that players on college teams should play purely out of enjoyment and the potential to develop physical, moral, and/or social skills. Amateurism came from the culture at schools like Harvard and Yale, some of the oldest schools in the country, where college athletics first began. Students at these schools, often from wealthy families, played sports for leisure and status reasons, never expecting a scholarship or compensation in return. The NCAA banned any form of payment to amateur athletes, including financial aid or scholarships. In 1948, the NCAA instituted a sanity code, which allows schools to provide payment to cover tuition and fees, but no money towards room and board. Schools were also prohibited from giving financial aid to athletes that was not available to other students. Also, in order to qualify for financial aid of any kind, an athlete was required to demonstrate financial need and meet the school's admission requirements. In 1951, the head authority of the NCAA, Walter Byers, introduced the term student athlete to the lexicon in order to place emphasis on the academic portion of an athlete's time in college. As time went on, the tilt towards the athlete portion of the student athlete label would become more and more pronounced. During the 1950s, racial segregation meant that most Black students could only attend historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. An unintended result of this injustice was that HBCUs were able to sustain themselves financially from the attendance of Black students from all socioeconomic backgrounds, even though they were still underfunded in comparison to predominantly white institutions, PWIs. As the 1900s moved forward, two things began happening simultaneously. The Black American Civil Rights Movement brought an end to school segregation, and college sports became more and more profitable. Television provided a way for people to enjoy live sports without attending the games physically. The NCAA tried to restrict the ability of schools to enter into contracts with cable networks. However, in 1984, the Supreme Court ruled that such restrictions were illegal. This ruling allowed individual schools to enter into agreements with networks for the right to show live games. In 2022, for example, the Big Ten Conference announced a 7-year agreement with TV networks and streaming platforms that is worth an estimated $7 billion. But what about the players? Out of 1,093,234 high school football players in the United States, 6.5% or 71,060 of those high school players will play in college. From there, 1.2% or around 853 of the college level players will get drafted to the NFL. The minimum requirements for Division I schools is a 2.3 GPA and a 980 SAT score or a 75 ACT score. However, at many colleges, special exception policies allow for students to be admitted even without meeting these already low requirements. The NCAA also tracks metrics like the academic progress rate, APR, and the graduation success rate, GSR, to monitor whether athletes are academically successful from year to year and are able to graduate with degrees. To calculate an APR for a school, each player who receives athletically related financial aid gets 1 point for staying in school and 1 point for remaining academically eligible. Then a team's actual points are divided by its total possible points and multiplied by 1,000. The 5 schools with the top APRs in 2022 are Clemson University, the University of Mississippi, the University of Alabama, Northwestern University, and the United States Air Force Academy. The GSR is determined by tracking first-time freshmen who are full-time students and whether they graduate in 6 years at the same institution. It doesn't count students in good standing who transfer to a different school. The GSR for those 5 schools for freshmen who entered in 2015 are 92% for Clemson University, 82% for the University of Mississippi, 89% for the University of Alabama, 97% for Northwestern University, and 93% for the United States Air Force Academy. You will see numbers like these at many of the most popular schools with the most successful football programs. They seem to indicate that the athletes are doing well academically and graduating. However, several scandals reveal how this picture is painted. In the 1980s, University of Georgia English teacher Jan Kemp accused the school of breaking NCAA and school rules to give passing grades to UGA football players so that they could play in the Sugar Bowl. When she was fired for her complaints, she successfully sued the school. Her lawsuit revealed a culture of academic fraud, and the UGA president resigned. In 2006, Florida State was penalized by the NCAA when it was discovered that athletes were taking online classes where they would receive test answers before they took exams and coursework was being completed on their behalf. In 2014, an 18-year athletic scandal was uncovered at the University of North Carolina. During this time, at least 3,100 students, most of them football players, took so-called paper classes. These classes did not require attendance and only asked students to turn in one paper at the end of the semester. In practice, the same papers were shared among students over several years, requiring them merely to change their name on the essay before turning it in. The classes were apparently created out of sympathy by an assistant in the African American Studies department. Coaches and school officials sanctioned the use of these classes to keep players eligible. The press caught wind of the corruption from university learning specialist Mary Willingham. She had participated in the paper classes scandal and discussed trying to help players remain eligible when many of them could barely read. These scandals are just a few of many. It's an open secret that strategies, some technically allowed and some prohibited, are used to keep athletes eligible so that they can continue to play. Meanwhile, the NCAA and the universities rake in the cash. The NCAA made $1.15 billion in 2021. Flagship schools like the University of Georgia and the University of Alabama make over $100 million per year from their football programs. These two factors, the deprioritization of academics and the large sums of money being made by school teams, mean one thing. The players on these teams are not student athletes at all, but professional athletic entertainers being paid a fraction of what they are actually owed. For the 99% of players who will not make it to the league, they find themselves trapped in a cycle created by the dishonest student-athlete culture. Some get injured, lose their scholarships, and are faced with the challenge of finding other ways to fund their education. Some drop out and end up with no degree. Most graduate, but with a degree in an education that is woefully inadequate to gain a job which makes a living wage. Thankfully, in 2021, the Supreme Court ruled that the NCAA prohibition on non-cash education-related benefits for college athletes violates federal antitrust law. This legalized the ability for all athletes to make money from their own name, image, and likeness. Many legal observers feel that the case also paved the way for athletes to be classified as workers, finally be able to demand a portion of the revenues made by school football programs. Ramoki Huma and other advocates are certainly working towards this goal. In his concurring opinion in the Supreme Court case, Justice Brett Kavanaugh states bluntly, "The bottom line is that the NCAA and its member colleges are suppressing the pay of student athletes who collectively generate billions of dollars in revenues for colleges every year. Those enormous sums of money flow to seemingly everyone except the student athletes. College presidents, athletic directors, coaches, conference commissioners, and the NCAA executives take 6- and 7-figure salaries. Colleges build lavish new facilities, but the student athletes who generate the revenues, many of whom are African American and from lower income backgrounds, end up with little or nothing." The call for more Black athletes to attend HBCUs is well-intentioned, but must be paired with demands to make changes to how college athletics operate overall. We can understand how frustrating it is for HBCUs to watch as PWIs rake in millions from the labor of a predominantly Black athletic team while they struggle with low budgets and crumbling facilities. The irony of the situation is that these athletes are the students that these PWIs refused to admit decades ago and would still refuse to admit today if it were not for their athletic ability. However, HBCUs are not entitled to the free labor of Black players any more than white institutions. Deion Sanders' departure may feel like a lost opportunity, but his time at Jackson State shed light on internal areas of improvement. Even if changes to player compensation occur and Black players select HBCUs exclusively, there will also need to be a movement to hire media specialists, financial experts, and other people who can properly negotiate contracts and partnerships to ensure the greatest revenues for everyone involved. Decades of institutional neglect, underfunding, funding and black flight means that it's unlikely one person could have created sustainable change. If the goal of our conversations is to discuss ways to uplift the black community as a whole, we must see the players as victims of an unfair exploitative scheme. We should fight for solutions that create sustainable funding for HBCUs while also ensuring that players receive the pay they have earned.
First off, I want to start off by thanking God and my family and my friends that came along. With that being said, I think every school, they gave me the opportunity. I will be taking my talents to.
Go ahead. Kevin, pick your hat. Where are you going to college?
Hey, put it on me. Hey, I'll be taking my talents, play with prime time.
Okay. Headed to Jackson State to join Deion.